菜根谭
Tending the roots of wisdom.
353，把握要点，卷书自在。
353. Grasp the key points. And move freely between advance and retreat.
菜根谭原文：人生原是一傀儡，只要根蒂在手，一线不乱，卷书自由，行止在我，一毫不受他人提多，便超出此场中矣。
白话文注解：人生本来就像一场木偶戏，只要你能把提线掌控在自己手中，那你的一生就会进退自如，去留随意，丝毫不受他人或外物的操纵。能做到这些，你就可以超然置身于尘世之外。
353-1. Life is akin to a puppet show, where you hold the strings controlling your actions. If you can master these strings, you'll navigate life with ease, unaffected by others or external circumstances. Achieving this level of control allows you to transcend the mundane world and its influences. Translated by Bayandefu.
353-2. Human life is really a puppet show. So long as I am in control, not a string gets out of order, folding or unfolding. I decide on movement or rest, not a bit controlled by others. This is the way to transcend this world. Translated by Robert Aitken Daniel W. Wyckoff. 353-3. Man's life is like a puppet play. So long as the strings are unhampered and you yourself are in control of those strings, then you are master of your own life, without the slightest manipulation by anyone else. Moreover, you will be able to escape the bonds of the vulgar world. Translated by Paul White.
353-4. Life is inherently like a puppet show. As long as you can control the strings in your own hands, your life will move freely, coming and going at will, without being manipulated by others or external forces. Achieving this allows you to transcend the mundane world. Translated by Wen Lin.
354，利害乃事之常，不若无事为福。
354. Gains and losses are the worldly norm. Better to find happiness in having no concerns.
菜根谭原文：一事起则一害生，故天下常以无事为福。读前人诗云：劝君莫话封侯事，一将功成万骨枯。又云：天下常令万事平，闸中不惜千年死。虽有雄心猛气，不觉化为兵陷矣。
白话文注解：大凡一件事的成功，就会伴随一件弊病的产生，所以世人常常以无事为福。古人曹嵩有诗写道：劝你不要去想封侯拜将的事。一位将领的功勋是建立在万千白骨之上。还有诗说，要想天下太平无事，就要把宝剑收入剑匣当中，就算搁置千年不用，也在所不惜。听了这些话，再大的雄心壮志，也会如冰消雪散。
354-1. In every success, there often comes an accompanying downside, which is why people frequently consider peace and lack of troubles as blessings. The ancient poet Chao Song wrote a poem that advises not to dwell on pursuits of titles and fame, stating that the achievements of a general are built upon countless white bones. Another poem expresses, for a peaceful world without troubles, one should sheath the precious sword, even if it remains unused for 1,000 years. It's worth it. Hearing such words, even the mightiest ambitions can fade away like melting snow. Translated by Bayandefu.
354-2. Every matter begets a detriment. Thus people think that one less thing is often a blessing. To quote a poet of old, I advise my lord not to take up warfare or the acquisition of fiefs. One general's victory means the bones of 10,000. Again, would that the myriad affairs be settled in peace. There would be no regrets about swords rusting in their boxes for 1,000 years. Knowing this, even heroic hearts and fierce ambition will melt like ice. Translated by Robert Aitken and Daniel W. Wyckoff. 354-3. When advantage appears, disadvantage emerges too. Therefore, people often regard refraining from activity as happiness. An ancient poem goes, would advise my lord to shun discussing warfare and the acquisition of fiefdoms. Because one general's victory leaves thousands of men's bones to rot. There is also the saying, if only peace and disengagement could come to the empire, it would be no matter of regret if the sword rusted in its scabbard for 1,000 years. Upon reading these lines, even a valiant and fiery spirit would not help becoming as cold and desolate as a drop of ice. Translated by Paul White.
354-4. In most cases, the success of one thing is accompanied by the emergence of drawbacks, which is why people often consider having no troubles as a blessing. The ancient poet Chao Song wrote a poem advising not to think about becoming a high-ranking official or a military general, as the achievements of a military leader are built upon countless white bones. Another poem suggests that if you want peace and tranquility, you should put away your precious sword. Even if it remains unused for 1,000 years, it is worth it. Hearing such words, even the greatest ambitions may fade away like melting ice and melting snow. Translated by Wen Lin.
355. 茫茫世间，矛盾之窟。
355. In the vast world, a labyrinth of contradictions.
菜根谭原文：银奔之父，搅而为泥；热衷之人，激而入道。清净之门，常为淫邪之冤首如此。
白话文注解：一个淫荡而跟人私奔的妇女，会因为一时的矫情，混进庙里去伪作尼姑；一个沉迷于权势名利的人，会由于一时激情而遁入空门去当道士。本该清净的寺庙道观，却常常成为淫荡邪恶之徒聚集的场所，原因大致如此。
355-1. A woman who is involved in promiscuity and elopes with another person might, due to a temporary whim, disguise herself as a nun and enter a temple. Similarly, a person engrossed in power and fame might, prompted by a momentary impulse, escape into a monastery to become a Taoist priest. Thus, places that should be serene and pure, like temples and monasteries, often become gathering spots for the immoral and depraved. This is roughly the reason behind such occurrences. Translated by Bayan Defu.
355-2. A wanton woman may repent and become a nun, and an enthusiast may turn to tranquility to enter the Tao. The pristine threshold often offers a refuge for the lascivious and wicked. Translated by Robert Aitken Daniel W. Wyckoff. 355-3. A lascivious woman may pretend to be remorseful and become a nun. A man who has pursued fame and fortune all his life may become disillusioned and retire to a Taoist temple. Thus, the convent and the shrine, which are havens far removed from the vulgar world, may become refuges for the wicked. Translated by Paul White.
355-4. A woman who indulges in immorality and runs away with someone may, due to a momentary affectation, sneak into a temple to masquerade as a nun. Similarly, a person obsessed with power and fame may, driven by a temporary passion, escape to become a Taoist. Temples and monasteries, originally meant to be places of purity, often become gathering spots for immoral and wicked individuals, and the reasons behind this are roughly as described. Translated by Wen Lin.
356. 身在局中，心在局外。
356. Physically present in the situation, but mentally detached from it.
菜根谭原文：波浪兼天，舟中不知距，而舟外者寒心；猖狂骂作，席上不知景，而席外者则折。故君子虽在室中，心要超室外也。
白话文注解：波浪滔天，坐在船中的人并不知道害怕，船外观看的人却吓得胆破心寒，酒醉撒野，同席的人泰然自若，席外的人却听得直吐舌头。所以，君子即使被某件事卷入漩涡中，但是心智却要抱着超然物外的态度。
356-1. The waves rage high, and those sitting in the boat do not feel fear, while those observing from outside the boat are terrified. When someone is drunk and acting recklessly, those sharing the same table might not be alert, but those outside the scene may find it shocking. Therefore, even if a person of noble character is caught up in a turbulent situation, their mindset should maintain an attitude of detachment from the worldly affairs. Translated by Bayan Defu.
356-2, with waves rising to heaven, those in the boat are not afraid, but those ashore are greatly alarmed. When the party becomes quarrelsome, those attending are not upset, but those outside are greatly distressed. Thus the noble person, while attending to things, must also be mindful of matter outside. Translated by Robert Aitken Daniel W. Wyckoff. 356-3, when the waves tower to the sky, the people inside the boat remain unperturbed, whereas the people outside are terrified. When a hullabaloo breaks out at a feast, those seated inside the feasting chamber are not alarmed in the least, it is the people outside who are seized with consternation. Thus, a wise man projects his mind outside the situation he finds himself in. Translated by Paul White.
356-4. The waves surge, and those sitting in the boat do not feel fear, while those observing from outside the boat are terrified. When someone is intoxicated and unruly, those sharing the same table may remain composed, but those outside the gathering are left astounded. Therefore, even if a noble person is caught up in a whirlwind of events, their mindset should be one of transcending the mundane. Translated by Wen Lin.
357. 减繁增进，安乐之基。
357. Reducing complexity and increasing tranquility form the foundation of peace and happiness.
菜根谭原文：人生减省1分便超脱了1分，如交友减便免纷扰，言语减便寡牵由，思虑减则精神不耗，聪明减则混沌可玩，彼不求日减而求日增者，真至故此生哉。
白话文注解：人生在世能减少1分麻烦，就多1分超脱世俗的乐趣。例如应酬减少，就能免除很多不必要的纠纷困扰；言语减少，就能避免很多错误和懊悔；思虑减少，就能避免精神的消耗；聪明机巧减少，就可保持纯真本性。假如每天不去减少，反而每日增加，那就等于是用枷锁把自己锁成囚徒。
357-1. In life, reducing a bit of trouble leads to a greater sense of detachment from the mundane. For example, by reducing social obligations, you can avoid unnecessary conflicts and troubles. Reducing words can prevent many mistakes and regrets, while reducing excessive contemplation can save mental energy. Cutting back on cleverness and cunning can help maintain your inherent purity. If instead of reducing, you allow things to accumulate day by day, it's like imprisoning yourself with chains. Translated by Bayan Defu.
357-2. If you save a little in your life, that much is transcended. If you reserve a little in social relationships, that much in disputes is reduced. If you withdraw a little of what is said, that much in error is saved. If you reserve a little in thought, that much in spirit is not wasted. If you reserve your cleverness a little, there is that much chance to be well received. If you don't seek daily reductions but look for daily increase, you are indeed shackling yourself. Translated by Robert Aitken and Daniel W. Wyckoff. 357-3. By cutting back on his activities, a man increases his ability to transcend the vulgar world by so much. For instance, by narrowing the circle of his friends, he saves himself much to ing and froing, and by becoming a man of few words, he reduces his chances of making mistakes. Moreover, by being sparing with his thoughts, he saves wear and tear on his spirit, and by setting less store by cleverness he retains more of his natural essence. Those who do not seek daily to reduce their activities, but instead strive to increase them, are forging manacles for themselves. Translated by Paul White.
357-4. In life, reducing troubles by 1 point brings an additional measure of transcendent joy. For instance, minimizing social interaction can spare one from unnecessary disputes and troubles. Speaking less can help avoid many errors and regrets. and reducing excessive thoughts can prevent mental exhaustion. Being less cunning and crafty can help maintain one's pure and innate nature. If each day does not involve reductions but rather accumulations, it is akin to locking oneself in chains and becoming a prisoner. Translated by Wen Lin.
358. 满腔和气，随地春风。
358. A heart brimming with harmony, like a spring breeze that goes wherever it pleases.
菜根谭原文：天运之寒暑易避，人世之炎凉难除。人世之炎凉易除，无心之冰炭难去。去得此中之冰炭，则满腔皆和气，自随地有春风矣。
白话文注解：大自然的寒暑容易躲避，世态的炎凉难以消除。世态的炎凉即使容易消除，世人积存在内心的仇怨却不易排除。假如有人能排除积压在心中的仇怨，那么满腔的祥和之气，自然也就感应的随地都有春风了。
358-1. The extremes of nature's cold and heat are easy to avoid, but the fluctuations of worldly circumstances are hard to eliminate. Even if these fluctuations were easy to eliminate, the resentments and grudges accumulated within people's hearts are not easily dispelled. If someone could rid themselves of these stored resentments, their heart would be filled with a sense of tranquility, and the atmosphere of harmony would be felt like a gentle breeze everywhere. Translated by Bayan Defu.
358-2. It is easier to cope with hot and cold climate than it is to get rid of the hot and cold of human relationships. It is easier to get rid of the hot and cold of human relationships than it is to remove the cold and unfeeling in our hearts. When this cold and unfeeling are removed, harmony and the spring breeze pervade everything. Translated by Robert Aitken Daniel W. Wyckoff. 358-3. It is easy to avoid the cold and the heat as the seasons change, but the inconstancy of human relations is difficult to eradicate. Even if it were easy to expunge it, the feelings of attachment and aversion in our hearts would still be difficult to get rid of. For if we could banish such feelings, our whole bin would be filled with the amiability which gives birth to the myriad things, and then it would be as if the breath of spring were blowing over the whole earth. Translated by Paul White.
358-4. Nature's heat and cold are easy to avoid, but the warmth and chill of the world are hard to eliminate. Even if the warmth and chill of the world are easy to eliminate, the accumulated resentments within people's hearts are not easy to dispel. If someone can eliminate the pent-up resentments in their heart, then a heart full of peace will naturally resonate, bringing a sense of spring everywhere. Translated by Wen Lin.
359. 超越口耳视语，得见人生真趣。
359. Transcend the senses and desires, to perceive the true essence of life.
菜根谭原文：茶不求精而壶意不躁，酒不求烈而尊意不空，素琴无弦而长调，短笛无腔而自适。纵难超越西黄，亦可匹绸鸡软。
白话文注解：喝茶根本不必一定要喝名茶，但是必须维持壶底不干；喝酒根本不必一定求干烈，但是必须维持酒壶不空。无弦之琴虽然弹不出旋律来，然而却足可调剂我的身心；无孔的横笛虽然吹不出音调来，然而却可使我精神舒畅。一个人假如能做到这种境界，虽然还不能算超越伏羲氏那种清静无为，但是起码也可与竹林七贤中的嵇康和阮籍那种性淡逍遥的生活媲美了。
359-1. Drinking tea doesn't necessarily have to be limited to exquisite teas, but it's essential to ensure the teapot remains filled. Drinking alcohol doesn't necessarily require the finest taste, but it's important to keep the wine jug from being emptied. Even though a stringless instrument like a qin may not produce melodies, it can still help to harmonize one's body and mind. Similarly, a holeless bamboo flute may not emit tones, yet it can bring about a sense of mental ease. If a person can attain this state, they might not reach the level of tranquility achieved by Fu Shi, but they can at least approach the serene and carefree lifestyle of Jikang and Ruanji among the 7 sages of the bamboo grove. Translated by Biandefu.
359-2, in tea drinking, it is not the blend that is important but that the pot must not be allowed to be dry. In drinking wine, it is not the strength of the wine that matters but that the wine cup must not be empty. The unornamented lute is always tuned even without strings, and the flute is perfectly suitable even without tunes. It may be impossible to surpass Emperor Shi, it is certainly possible to reach the level of Ji and Ruan. Translated by Robert Aitken Daniel W. Wyckoff. 359-3. When drinking tea, it is not important to sip fine blends. What is important is to make sure that the teapot is never dry, and that there is always tea to drink. When drinking wine, it is not important to savor the mellow products of famous vats. What is important is to make sure that the wine cup is never empty, and that there is always wine to drink. Laying your hands on a lute, even though it has no strings, can soothe your mind. Holding a simple flute, even though it has no holes, can refresh your brain. Thus, although it would be difficult to surpass the wisdom of the ancient mythical emperor Fu Shi by putting themselves in conformity with nature, people could perhaps reach the level of Ji Kong and Ruan Ji, 2 of the sages widely admired in the Three Kingdoms period of the 3rd century. Translated by Paul White.
359-4. Drinking tea doesn't necessarily have to be with famous tea, but it's essential to keep the teapot from drying out. Drinking wine doesn't necessarily have to be for its sweetness, but it's crucial to keep the wine jug from being empty. Even though a stringless zither may not produce a melody, it's enough to soothe my body and mind. Similarly, a toneless transverse flute may not play any tunes, but it can bring comfort to my spirit. If a person can achieve this state, although it may not be considered surpassing the tranquility of Fushi, at least it can be compared to the simple and carefree lives of Jikang and Ruanji among the 7 sages of the bamboo grove. Translated by Wen Lin.
360. 万事皆缘，随遇而安。
360. Everything is interconnected by fate. Find peace in accepting whatever comes your way.
菜根谭原文：世事随缘，无如素位。4字是渡海的浮囊。盖世路茫茫，一念求全，则万绪纷起；随遇而安，则无入不得已。
白话文注解：佛家主张随缘，凡事都要顺其自然发展，不可勉强；儒家主张素位，凡事都要按照本分去做，不可妄贪身外之事。这无如素位4个字是为人处事的秘诀，就像是渡海的救生船。因为人生之路漫长曲折，假如任何事情都要求全尽美，必然会引起很多忧愁烦恼。假如凡事都能随遇而安，也就处处悠然自得。
360-1. The Buddhist philosophy advocates going with the flow, allowing things to naturally unfold without force. The Confucian approach emphasizes staying within one's proper role, adhering to one's responsibilities without getting entangled in unnecessary matters. These 4 words, go with the flow, stay in your proper role, serve as a secret for dealing with people and situations, much like a lifeboat on a journey across the sea. Since the path of life is long and winding, if one strives for perfection in every matter, it will inevitably lead to a lot of worry and distress. However, if one can accept things as they come, they can find contentment in every situation. Translated by Biandefu.
360-2. Buddhism teaches you to follow your karma, and Confucianism teaches holding to your station. These 2 teachings are life buoys for crossing the sea. The worldly roads are vast and unpredictable. A host of extraneous thoughts arises from one thought of selfish survival. Follow natural encounters with peace and security, and you will find contentment at every turn. Translated by Robert Aitken Daniel W. Wyckoff. 360-3. Buddhism encourages people to let things follow their natural course. Confucianism teaches people to be contented with the present state of things. These two principles are the life belts which enable men to cross the sea of suffering. The roads of the vulgar world are vast and boundless. To seek perfection is to stir up a multitude of desires and problems. If you can adapt yourself with satisfaction to any situation that arises, then wherever you go you will find contentment. Translated by Paul White.
360-4. The Buddhist philosophy advocates going with the flow, letting everything develop naturally without forcing it. The Confucian philosophy emphasizes staying in one's proper place, doing everything according to one's responsibilities without greed for things outside one's role. The 4 words, going with the flow, staying in one's proper place, serve as the secret to handling life and affairs, like a lifeboat for crossing the sea. Because the journey of life is long and winding, if one seeks perfection in everything, it will inevitably lead to much worry and trouble. If, on the other hand, one can adapt in every situation, one can find contentment at every turn. Translated by Wen Lin.